Okay, so are you ready to dive into Prayers in Stone with me?
Hmm.
Because this book, uh, it's not your typical travel guide. This is about getting under Nagasaki's skin,
Hmm.
you know, a city that refused to be silenced.
Yeah.
These are the kind of stories that stick with you long after you've put the book down, the ones that make you see things
I
differently.
definitely.
And thankfully, we've got just the expert to help us unpack it all. Someone who can, well, you always seem to see between the lines of history, right? We often lump Hiroshima and Nagasaki together, but this book suggests they offer totally different experiences.
It's a really interesting point. The author talks about how Hiroshima carries this heavy mantle of being first, that ever-present reminder of what happened there, just etched into the landscape. Nagasaki, while forever changed, of course, seems to have a different energy about it.
It's like almost like a quiet strength. Like he even mentioned the importance of festivals to the people there. Their love of life almost feels like an act of defiance in a way.
Yeah, and the author actually suggests it might be even deeper than that. He makes this fascinating comparison between Nagasaki's history as this bustling port city, open to different cultures for centuries, and its response to the bombing. It's almost as if that openness, that ability to adapt and rebuild, it became even more essential after the devastation.
Wow, so it's almost baked into the city's identity. But even with that shared spirit, I kept thinking about the personal stories, especially Dr. Nagai. His story just, I don't know, it really got to me. To lose his wife, be battling leukemia, yet he still dedicates himself to helping others.
The author definitely seems drawn to Dr. Nagai's story, too. He uses him as a powerful example of that resilience we were talking about. And I think what's so striking is that Dr. Nagai found a sense of peace in his faith. Remember when he built that tiny Love Thy Neighbor hut in the ruins?
Oh, yeah.
It speaks to that very human need for connection, even when faced with such unimaginable loss, you
Huh.
know?
It really makes you think about what gets us through those moments when it feels like everything's falling apart. And I thought it was so interesting how he compares Dr. Nagai with Tamikihara, the writer from Hiroshima. That's like two sides of the same coin, both trying to make sense of the unimaginable in their own way.
Exactly. There's no right way to process that kind of trauma, right? But Dr. Nagai's story, his ability to find some kind of path forward, it does seem to resonate with that same resilient spirit we were talking about.
And speaking of finding hope, one thing that struck me about this book is how it takes you on these walking tours. It's like you're uncovering hidden stories in the most unassuming places. I don't know if you ever thought about how the actual layout of a city, like the streets and buildings, can shape how we understand its history?
It's not something you think about every day, but you're right, especially with a place like Nagasaki. It's not just about these big grand memorials, it's about those whispers of the past that linger in these everyday places.
Exactly. Like this book opens up a side of Nagasaki most tourists probably never see, all these quiet corners with these forgotten stories. And the way he structures these walking tours, focusing on churches and schools, even trees, it's like you're putting together a jigsaw puzzle of resilience, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and each location adds another voice to the story, right? Like Peace Park, for example. Most people see the monuments, the memorials, but the author, he digs a little deeper, like when he talks about the original ground level they unearthed during
Oh,
excavations.
that sends shivers down my spine, I have to say. Imagining them finding those pieces of daily life,
Hmm.
you know, broken pottery, melted glass, just frozen in time beneath the surface. History isn't some abstract thing. It's right there under our feet.
It's a powerful reminder, isn't it, about the importance of keeping those memories alive. These places, they become more than just historical markers. They're like, I don't know, living reminders of what was lost.
Absolutely. And I love how he weaves those personal stories into like Shirayama Primary School. I can't get the image of young Kayoko out of my head. Her statue clutching that lunchbox, frozen in that moment. It's
Yeah.
heartbreaking,
Well,
but so powerful at the same time.
that's one of the things that the author seems to suggest really resonates. The fact that the bombing's impact, it wasn't just contained to that one day,
Hmm.
it echoed through families for generations afterward. And planting those cherry trees, the ones Kayoko's mother planted, it's like, I don't know, this testament to love and remembrance.
To the strength of the human spirit, absolutely.
Mm.
Speaking of powerful stories, what about the Nameshi Temporary Relief Station? I mean, it wasn't a grand building or anything, but the bravery of that doctor and his family opening up their home to victims right after the bombing.
It's incredible. And the author doesn't shy away from how difficult things were. Like the nurses having to use oil on wounds because they didn't have anything else. It just shows the chaos, the desperation of those early days, and the fact that the building's been torn down. It makes you think about how we choose to preserve these stories, these physical connections to the past.
It's true. It's like each site we talk about offers a different perspective on Nagasaki's story. The resilience, the loss, the enduring spirit of the people.
Hmm.
If you had to choose just one, which site speaks to you the most?
That's a tough one. They all have such a profound impact in their own way. But the story of Urakami Cathedral always gets to me, can you imagine? This incredible structure, the largest church in East Asia at the time, reduced to rubble. And
Uh,
yet,
and yet they found the head of that Virgin Mary statue in the wreckage. It's
Yep.
almost symbolic, isn't it?
It is.
And that part about how the sound of the cathedral bells, how it brought comfort to survivors, chills, seriously.
It speaks to that universal need for hope,
Yeah.
right? Something to hold on to when everything feels lost. Rebuilding the cathedral on the same spot,
Yeah.
using some of the original stones. It's a powerful testament to the idea of starting over, of rising from the ashes.
It's like those bells, they kind of represent Nagasaki as a whole, don't you think? This city full of, I don't know, so much tragedy, but so much resilience too. Its spirit just won't be broken.
You said it. And it's not just the bells, right? The author does a brilliant job of weaving in these recurring themes, the bells, the paper cranes, rebuilding. They all come together to tell this really powerful story of resilience. Speaking of resilience, there's this really unexpected turn at the end of the book that I wasn't expecting at all. The author has to actually leave Nagasaki. Not because of a war this time, but because of Fukushima.
It's almost hard to wrap your head around. After years of dedicating himself to understanding one nuclear tragedy, he gets confronted with another. It really just goes to show, these events, they don't stay in the past, do they? They have these lasting impacts.
They do. And it
Yeah.
forces us to face this uncomfortable truth about, I don't know, maybe our relationship with nuclear power in general. Here's this country that has seen firsthand the devastation of atomic warfare, and yet, they still rely on nuclear energy. The author doesn't shy away from that irony at all.
It definitely makes his message about peace and disarmament hit even harder.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't just some plea from the past. It's a message for the future.
Yeah.
You know, it makes me wonder, after spending all this time with this book, uncovering all these incredible stories, has it changed how you see things, especially now, with everything going on in the world?
It's hard not to feel this sense of urgency, this deeper understanding of what's at risk. Because these stories, they do so much more than just teach us history. They force us to connect with the human costs of these conflicts, and it makes all those threats out there feel all too real.
I think that's what makes this book, and even our conversation today, so important. It's a reminder that we need to remember, we need to learn, and most importantly, we need to act. Listen, if you're looking for a travel guide with all the pretty pictures and tourist spots, this ain't it. But if you're ready for something more, if you want to connect with the heart and soul of a city, confront the hard truths of history and the incredible resilience of humanity, well, Prayers in Stone is out there waiting for you. A huge thank you to our expert for taking us on this journey. And to you, our listeners, we hope this deep dive inspires you to find those hidden stories all around you, the ones whispering from the cracks in the sidewalk, etched onto the very soul of our cities.